The dust hung thick in the air as Olivia Norton stood on the weathered porch of her small house on the edge of Sonora, Texas, watching the sun bleed red across the horizon while wondering how she would survive another month alone. It was August of 1883, and the heat seemed determined to press the life out of everything it touched, much like the fever that had taken her husband 6 months prior. Now she stood among the remnants of their brief life together, preparing to sell every piece of furniture they had chosen with such hope just 2 years ago when they had married and moved to this unforgiving land. She had placed a handwritten sign at the edge of town 3 days ago, and word had spread quickly through Sonora's dusty streets. A widow selling everything, leaving town, heading back east to her sister in Missouri. That was what people assumed, and Olivia had not corrected them because she did not know what else to do. At 23 years old, she had become a widow in a town where she knew almost no one, where her husband had brought her with dreams of ranching that died along with him. The furniture was not much, but it was all she had. A pine dining table that wobbled slightly on uneven legs, 4 mismatched chairs, a bed frame her husband had built himself, a chest of drawers with intricate carvings he had worked on during the long evenings, 2 oil lamps, a rocking chair, and a small writing desk where she had penned hopeful letters to her family. Everything carried memories that weighed more than their physical forms. Olivia heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching and shielded her eyes against the lowering sun. A lone rider moved slowly down the dirt road, his silhouette dark against the orange sky. She straightened her black dress, the same one she had worn to the funeral, and nearly every day since because propriety demanded a widow dress the part, even in this heat that made the fabric cling to her skin. The rider drew closer, and she could make out more details. He was tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low, his shoulders broad beneath a dusty brown shirt. He rode with the easy posture of a man who had spent more time on horseback than on his own 2 feet. As he approached her small property, he slowed his horse to a walk, then stopped at the edge of her yard. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was low and careful, the voice of a man who spoke infrequently but meant what he said. "I heard you were selling some furniture." Olivia nodded, clasping her hands in front of her. "Yes, sir. Everything I have, actually." He dismounted in one fluid motion, and she could see him properly now. He was perhaps 30 years old, maybe a bit younger, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the sun and eyes that held a particular kind of loneliness she recognized, because she saw it in her own reflection every morning. His name was Fletcher Morgan, though she did not know that yet. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, and there was something almost shy in the question, as though he feared he might be intruding. "Please do. It is all inside except for the rocking chair there on the porch." He walked up the steps with a slight limp she noticed, but did not comment on. His boots were worn but well maintained, his clothes clean despite the dust of travel. He moved to the rocking chair first, running his hand along the armrest with surprising gentleness for such large hands. "Did your husband make this?" he asked. "No, we bought it from a carpenter in town." "But he made the chest of drawers inside. He was good with his hands." Her voice caught slightly on the past tense, and she cleared her throat. Fletcher nodded and said nothing more, stepping to the door. She followed him inside, where the heat was even more oppressive despite the open windows. He looked at everything slowly, methodically, as though memorizing each piece. He sat in each chair, testing their stability. He examined the joinery on the table, the drawers in the chest, the construction of the bed frame that she had already stripped of its linens. "You are leaving town, then?" he asked after a long silence. "I have nowhere else to go. I cannot keep this house much longer, and there is no work here for a woman alone." He nodded again, still looking at the furniture rather than at her. "What are you asking for all of it?" She had thought about this for days, trying to calculate what was fair, what was desperate, what was possible. $40 for everything. It was far less than the furniture was worth, and they both knew it. The chest of drawers alone had cost her husband weeks of work and represented hours of skill. But she needed money quickly, and she needed to be practical. Fletcher finally turned to look at her directly, and his eyes were a startling clear gray, like storm clouds. "That is too little, madam. This is quality work, and even the pieces that were bought are in good condition." She felt something tighten in her chest, something like pride mixed with grief. "I am aware of their worth, sir, but I am also aware of my circumstances. $40 would get me to Missouri with enough left over to survive until I find work." "What if I gave you $60 for it all?" Olivia blinked, certain she had misheard. "I am sorry, $60. That is closer to fair, though still probably less than you could get if you had time to sell each piece separately." "I do not have time," she admitted. "The rent on this house is due in 2 weeks, and I cannot pay it." Fletcher pulled off his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting, and held the hat in both hands. "Madam, I do not mean to pry into your business, but I have a proposition that might sound strange." Olivia felt her spine stiffen. She had heard about propositions before, the kind that widows and desperate women received from men who saw opportunity in tragedy. "I am not interested in that kind of arrangement, sir." His face reddened immediately, and he shook his head quickly. "No, madam, nothing like that." "I apologize if I gave that impression. I meant something different entirely." He paused, seeming to gather his words. "I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here. It is not much yet, but it is mine, and it is growing. I have been living in a line shack that is barely fit for animals, cooking over an open fire, sleeping on the ground. I need furniture, and I need help. Help! I need someone who can cook proper meals, keep accounts, manage a household. I have hands who work the cattle, but no one to run the house itself. I have been trying to do it all myself, and I am failing at most of it." He spoke quickly now, as though afraid he would lose his nerve. "I would pay you fair wages, give you a room of your own, and you would have security. You would not have to go back east if you did not want to." Olivia stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. "You want to hire me as a housekeeper?" "Yes, madam. A housekeeper, a cook, whatever you want to call it. I know it is sudden, and I know you do not know me from Adam, but I am desperate for help, and you seem to need a solution that does not involve leaving everything behind." "I do not know you at all," she said slowly. "For all I know, you could be a murderer or a thief." "That is fair," Fletcher said. "You could ask around town about me. My name is Fletcher Morgan. I have been in Sonora for 3 years. I have an account at the bank, I pay my debts, and I do not cause trouble. The sheriff knows me. The preacher knows me. Ask anyone." There was something earnest in his face, something that made her want to believe him despite her caution. "Why do you not just hire someone from town? Surely there are women who would take that work." "I have asked. Most women in Sonora are already married or working for established families. The ones who are not do not want to live that far out of town. My place is isolated, and the work would be hard, at least at first. But I would treat you with respect, and I would pay you $10 a month plus room and board." $10 a month was good wages, better than most housekeepers made. She could save money, perhaps eventually have enough to start over somewhere if she wanted, or perhaps even stay in Texas and build something of her own. But it meant trusting a stranger, moving to an isolated ranch, putting herself in a vulnerable position. "I need time to think about this," she said. "Of course, I would not expect any other answer." Fletcher put his hat back on. I will buy all the furniture regardless of what you decide about the other matter. $60, and I can arrange to have it hauled out to my place within the week. But the job offer stands separately. You can take the money and go to Missouri, or you can come work for me. Either way, I want to pay you fairly for what these pieces are worth. Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes unexpectedly. It had been so long since anyone had treated her with simple kindness, without pity or judgment. Why are you doing this? Fletcher was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft. Because I know what it is like to be alone and have no good choices. Someone helped me once when I needed it. I suppose I am trying to pass that forward. He pulled a leather wallet from his pocket and counted out $60 in bills and coins, placing them carefully on the dining table. That is for the furniture. Take your time deciding about the rest. I will be at the Grand Hotel for the next 2 days if you want to find me. Ask anyone in town about me first, though. Do not take my word alone. With that, he touched his hat brim again and walked out, leaving her standing in the sweltering room with $60 on the table and a decision that felt impossibly large. After Fletcher left, Olivia sat in the rocking chair on the porch and watched the last of the sunset fade into darkness. The money sat inside on the table, more than she had expected to get, more than enough to start over. But his offer circled in her mind like a hawk over prey, demanding attention. She thought about her options with the cold practicality that widowhood had forced upon her. She could take the money and go to Missouri, where her sister lived in a small town with her husband and 3 children. She would be welcome there, she knew, but she would also be a burden, another mouth to feed, a charity case sleeping in a corner of a crowded house. Or she could take Fletcher Morgan's offer, work as a housekeeper on an isolated ranch for a man she did not know, and risk whatever dangers that might entail. The next morning, Olivia put on her bonnet and walked into town. Sonora was not large, barely more than a main street with a few branching roads, but it had the essentials of civilization. A bank, a general store, a church, a hotel, a sheriff's office, and 3 saloons. She went to the sheriff's office first. Sheriff Tom Hayes was a grizzled man in his 50s with a salt and pepper mustache and eyes that had seen too much. He looked up from his desk when she entered, his expression shifting to polite attention. "Mrs. Norton, is it not? I am sorry for your loss. Your husband was a good man." "Thank you, Sheriff. I am here to ask about someone. A man named Fletcher Morgan came to see me yesterday about buying my furniture. He mentioned you might know him." The sheriff leaned back in his chair, nodding. "Fletcher Morgan. Yes, I know him. Has a ranch north of here. Keeps to himself mostly, but he is honest. Never had a bit of trouble from him. Why do you ask? He made me a business proposition, and I wanted to verify his character before I considered it." "What kind of proposition?" The sheriff's eyes sharpened slightly, protective. "He offered me work as a housekeeper at his ranch. He said he would pay fair wages and that everything would be proper and respectable." Sheriff Hayes scratched his chin thoughtfully. "That sounds like Fletcher. He has been trying to build up that ranch of his for a few years now. Works hard, from what I hear. As for his character, I have never known him to be anything but honest. He came here from Kansas after the war, bought that land with money he saved, and has been breaking his back to make it work." He paused. "That said, Mrs. Norton, it is an isolated place, and you would be out there with him and his ranch hands. I cannot vouch for what might happen in private, only for what I have seen in public." "I understand. Thank you, Sheriff." She visited the bank next, where the manager confirmed that Fletcher Morgan kept an account, always paid his debts, and had never bounced a check. At the general store, the owner's wife said Fletcher was quiet but polite, and always treated people fairly. At the church, the preacher said he rarely saw Fletcher at services, but when he did come, he sat in the back and left quickly, like a man who felt uncomfortable in his own skin, but was trying anyway. By noon, Olivia had a picture of Fletcher Morgan as a solitary man, hard-working and honest, someone who kept his word and caused no trouble. It was not a guarantee of safety, but it was better than nothing. She found him at the Grand Hotel that afternoon. He was sitting on the porch in one of the rocking chairs, reading a newspaper that was probably a week old, given how long it took for news to reach this part of Texas. He looked up when she approached, and something flickered in his eyes that might have been hope. "Mrs. Norton," he said, standing quickly. "Mr. Morgan, I have thought about your offer, and I have asked around town about you. And what did you learn? That you are either a very good man or a very good liar. I suppose I will have to take a chance on finding out which." Fletcher's expression remained serious. "Does that mean you will take the job?" "I will take the job on certain conditions. I want my own room with a lock on the door. I want my wages paid on the 1st of every month. And I want your word in front of a witness that you will treat me with respect and that this arrangement is purely a business one." "You have my word on all of that. Who do you want as a witness?" "The sheriff, if he is willing." They walked together to the sheriff's office, where Sheriff Hayes listened to the terms of their agreement and made Fletcher repeat his promises aloud. Then he shook both their hands and said to Fletcher, "If I hear that you have broken your word, Morgan, you will answer to me." "Understood, Sheriff." Olivia felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. It was not perfect, but it was something. She was choosing a path forward instead of just letting circumstances push her wherever they would. Over the next week, Olivia prepared for the move. She packed her few personal belongings into 2 carpet bags and a small trunk. Her clothing, her mother's Bible, a few letters, a photograph of her wedding day. Everything else had been part of the furniture sale. Fletcher arranged for a wagon to transport the furniture to his ranch, and on a bright morning in late August, Olivia climbed up onto the wagon seat beside him and left Sonora behind. The ranch hands Fletcher had hired to help with the move rode behind them, leading Fletcher's horse. The road north was rough, more of a trail than a proper road, cutting through scrubland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Olivia was grateful for her bonnet and the canteen of water Fletcher had brought. "Tell me about your ranch," she said after they had ridden in silence for a while. Fletcher kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "I bought 640 acres 3 years ago. It is not the best land, kind of rocky and dry, but it has a good creek that runs most of the year, and the grass is decent enough for cattle. I started with 100 head. I am up to about 300 now. I have 2 full-time hands, Miguel and his son Carlos. They live in a bunkhouse I built last year. There is a barn, a corral, and the house." "What is the house like?" "Small. 2 rooms right now. I built it myself, so it is rough, but it is solid. I have been planning to add on to it, but I have not had the time. With you coming, I will make that a priority. I will build you a proper bedroom with a door and a lock like I promised. Where will you sleep in the meantime? In the other room, or in the barn if that makes you more comfortable. I meant what I said, Mrs. Norton. This is a business arrangement, and I will treat it as such." They rode on, and Olivia tried to imagine what her life would look like now. Cooking for Fletcher and his ranch hands, keeping house in a rough 2-room building, living miles from town. It was not what she had envisioned when she married, but then, nothing about her life had turned out the way she had imagined. "Why did you really offer me this job?" she asked suddenly. "You could have just bought the furniture and left it at that." Fletcher was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, I told you the truth about needing help, but I also saw something in you that I recognized. You looked like someone who was trying to figure out how to survive when all your plans had fallen apart. I have been there. When I came to Texas, I had nothing. A man gave me work when no one else would, gave me a chance to build something. He died 2 years ago, and I have been trying to make good on what he started. When I saw you standing there in that black dress, looking lost, I thought maybe I could give you the same chance someone gave me. It was the most he had said at one time since she met him, and there was something raw in his voice that made her chest tighten. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for giving me a choice instead of just charity. You are working for your wages. That is not charity. That is just fair dealing." When they finally arrived at the ranch, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. Olivia saw what Fletcher had meant about it being rough. The house was indeed small, made of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney at one end. The barn was larger than the house, and the corral held about a dozen horses. Beyond that stretched land that seemed to go on forever, broken only by occasional trees and the thin silver line of a creek in the distance. Two men came out of the barn as the wagon pulled up. One was older, perhaps 50, with dark skin weathered by sun and wind, his black hair streaked with gray. The other was younger, maybe 20, with the same dark eyes and strong features. Father and son, clearly. "Miguel, Carlos, this is Mrs. Norton," Fletcher said as he climbed down from the wagon. "She is going to be keeping house for us. I expect you to treat her with respect." Miguel pulled off his hat. "Welcome, Mrs. Norton. It is about time this place had a proper cook. We have been eating Fletcher's attempts at biscuits for too long." Carlos grinned. "His biscuits could be used as ammunition, Senora." Despite everything, Olivia found herself smiling. "I promise my biscuits will be edible at least." Fletcher showed her inside the house while Miguel and Carlos began unloading the furniture. The interior was dim and dusty, with a stone fireplace, a small iron stove, a rough table, and not much else. One doorway led to another room that Fletcher used as a bedroom. There were gaps between some of the logs where the chinking had fallen out, and the whole place had the air of a space where someone slept but did not live. "I know it is not much," Fletcher said, sounding almost apologetic, "but I will make it better. I will start building your room tomorrow." "It is fine," Olivia said, though her heart sank a little at the roughness of it all. "Where should I sleep tonight? You take my room. I will sleep in the barn until your room is ready. I have done it before. It is comfortable enough. I cannot take your bed on the first night." "Yes, you can and you will. That was part of our agreement. You get a proper room, and until that is built, you get the only room there is." She wanted to argue, but she could see the set of his jaw that said he would not budge on this. "All right, thank you." They spent the rest of the evening unloading and arranging the furniture. The dining table went in the main room, along with the chairs and the chest of drawers. The bed frame went into Fletcher's room, which was now Olivia's room. The writing desk fit nicely near one of the windows. When everything was in place, the house looked almost civilized, though it still had the rough edges of a bachelor's dwelling. Miguel and Carlos had gone back to their bunkhouse, and Fletcher stood awkwardly in the main room, hat in his hands again. "There is some food in the pantry," he said. "Not much, but enough for tonight. Tomorrow I can show you how everything works, where the well is, how the stove runs. Miguel usually does the shopping in town once a week. You can give him a list of what you need." "All right. If you need anything during the night, just call out. I will hear you from the barn." "I will be fine, Mr. Morgan. Thank you." He nodded and left, and Olivia was alone in the small house. She found the pantry Fletcher had mentioned, which was really just a box with a door, and inside were some flour, cornmeal, beans, salt pork, and coffee. She made a simple meal of beans and cornbread, eating alone at the table she had once shared with her husband in a different life. That night, lying in Fletcher's bed in what was now her room, Olivia stared at the ceiling and wondered if she had made the right choice. The house was rough and isolated, and she was essentially alone with three men she barely knew. But she had a locked door between her and the world, she had money in her pocket, and she had work to do. It was more than she'd had a week ago. Sleep came fitfully, full of dreams of dust and distance. Olivia woke before dawn to the sound of roosters and men's voices outside. She dressed quickly in the dim light, braided her hair, and went out to the main room. Through the window, she could see Fletcher and the ranch hands already working, moving horses into the corral, checking equipment. She built up the fire in the stove and started making breakfast. By the time the sun was fully up, she had biscuits in the oven, bacon frying, and coffee boiling. The smell of food brought the men in like a dinner bell. Fletcher came in first, followed by Miguel and Carlos, all of them dusty and sweating despite the early hour. "Good morning," Olivia said, suddenly shy about having three men in the kitchen watching her cook. "Good morning, Mrs. Norton," Fletcher said. "You did not have to make breakfast so early. You are all working. You need to eat." They sat at the table and she served them. The biscuits were golden and fluffy, the bacon crisp, the coffee strong. The men ate with the desperate hunger of people who had been living on poor food for too long. Fletcher ate 3 biscuits and looked like he wanted more but was too polite to ask. "This is wonderful, Senora," Miguel said. "The best meal I have had in months." "It is just breakfast," Olivia said, but she felt pleased nonetheless. After the meal, Fletcher stayed behind while Miguel and Carlos went back to work. "I want to show you around properly," he said, "so you know where everything is." He walked her through the property, showing her the well where they drew water, the spring house where they kept things cool, the chicken coop she had not noticed the night before, the garden plot that was mostly weeds and dead plants. "I tried to keep a garden," Fletcher admitted. "But I do not have the touch for it. If you want to try, you are welcome to it." "I will see what I can do," Olivia said, looking at the sad patch of earth. It was too late in the season to plant much, but she might be able to salvage something. He showed her the storage shed where they kept tools and supplies, the smokehouse that was currently empty, the woodpile that needed splitting. Everything was functional but barely, the work of a man trying to do too much alone. "I am starting on your room today," Fletcher said. "It will take me about a week to build it properly, maybe a bit more. I am going to add it onto the side of the house with its own window and a proper door with a lock. You do not have to do that so quickly. I can manage with the current arrangement. I made you a promise, Mrs. Norton. I intend to keep it." Over the next week, Olivia fell into a routine. She woke early, made breakfast for the men, cleaned the house, prepared lunch and dinner, and tried to bring some order to the chaos of the ranch. In the evenings, after the dishes were done, she would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the endless Texas landscape while listening to the sound of Fletcher's hammer and saw as he built her room. He worked on it every evening after his ranch work was done, often by lantern light, refusing help from Miguel and Carlos because he said they had done enough during the day. Olivia would bring him coffee and watch him work, noting the careful way he measured each board, the precision of his cuts, the steady rhythm of his hammer. They talked sometimes during those evenings, small conversations about nothing important. She learned that he had grown up in Kansas, the son of farmers who had lost everything in the drought of the late 60s. He had fought in the Indian Wars as a young man, a fact he mentioned only once and with obvious discomfort. After that, he had drifted until he came to Texas and found work with the rancher who had given him his start. "What was his name?" Olivia asked one evening. "The man who helped you, Samuel Price. He was a good man, taught me everything about ranching. When he died, he left me some money. Not a lot, but enough to buy this land and get started. He must have thought highly of you." Fletcher paused in his work, a board balanced on his shoulder. "He was like a father to me when I needed one. I try to live in a way that would make him proud." "I think you are doing that," Olivia said softly. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them in the fading light, something unnamed but present. The room was finished on a Sunday evening in early September. Fletcher installed the door, complete with a lock and key, and stepped back to show her. "It is done," he said, and there was pride in his voice. "Your own room, like I promised." Olivia walked inside. It was small but well made, with a window that looked out toward the creek, walls that were smooth and properly chinked, and a door that closed tightly. Fletcher had even built shelves along one wall and a small closet for her clothes. "It is perfect," she said, and she meant it. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. You have been here 2 weeks now, and you are making us real meals and keeping this place civilized. I think you have earned the right to call me Fletcher if you are comfortable with that. Then you should call me Olivia." "Olivia," he said, testing the name. "That is a pretty name." She felt herself blush and busied herself with examining the shelves. "I should move my things in here." "I will help you." They moved her few belongings from his room to her new one, and when it was done, Fletcher stood in the doorway, not crossing the threshold. "If you need anything at all, you just let me know," he said. "And remember, you can lock the door whenever you want. This is your space." That night, Olivia locked the door and lay in her new bed in her new room, and for the first time since her husband's death, she felt something that resembled safety. The weeks passed, and Olivia transformed the ranch house. She scrubbed every surface until it shone, patched the holes in the walls, made curtains for the windows from fabric Miguel brought back from town, and organized the chaos into something resembling a home. She revived part of the garden, planting late-season vegetables that might survive until the first frost. She learned to make do with the limited supplies they had, creating meals that the men praised extravagantly, though she suspected they would have praised anything that was not beans and burned biscuits. Fletcher watched these changes with something like wonder. He would come in from a long day of work to find the house warm and welcoming, food on the table, everything in its place. Sometimes, Olivia would catch him just standing in the doorway, looking around with an expression she could not quite read. "Are you all right?" she asked him one evening. "Yes, I am just not used to this. Having a real home, I mean. It has been a long time." "How long?" "Since I was a boy, before the drought. My mother used to keep our house like this. I had forgotten what it was like." There was such loneliness in his voice that Olivia felt her heart constrict. She understood loneliness. She had been drowning in it since her husband's death, moving through her days in a gray fog of grief and uncertainty. But here on this rough ranch with this quiet man and his gentle-hearted ranch hands, the fog was starting to lift. She found herself watching Fletcher when she thought he was not looking, noticing things about him. The way he was always gentle with the horses, talking to them in a low voice. The way he never raised his voice to Miguel or Carlos, treating them as equals rather than hired help. The way he saved the tenderest pieces of meat for her at dinner, taking the gristly bits for himself. Small kindnesses that spoke of a good heart. October came, bringing cooler temperatures and the promise of winter. The ranch work intensified as they prepared for the changing season, and Fletcher worked from dawn until well after dark most days. Olivia started packing him lunches to take out on the range, and he would come back with the empty pail and a quiet thank you that felt more intimate than it should. One evening, after a particularly long day, Fletcher came in later than usual. Olivia had kept his dinner warm, and she served it to him while he washed up at the basin. He ate slowly, as though every muscle in his body ached, and when he was done, he just sat there, staring at nothing. "Fletcher," Olivia said gently, "are you all right? Just tired? We lost a calf today to a mountain lion, found what was left of it near the creek. It is part of ranching, but I hate losing them. I am sorry." He looked up at her, and his eyes were so full of weariness that she acted without thinking. She moved behind him and placed her hands on his shoulders, feeling the tension knotted there. He stiffened for a moment, then slowly relaxed as she began to knead the tight muscles. "You do not have to do that," he said, but his voice was weak with exhaustion. "You work yourself too hard. Someone needs to take care of you." They stayed like that for a long moment, Olivia's hands on his shoulders, Fletcher's eyes closed, the house quiet around them. It was the most they had touched since she arrived, and Olivia was acutely aware of the warmth of him, the solidness of his body, the way her pulse had quickened. She pulled her hands away suddenly, flustered. "I should clean up the kitchen." "Olivia," Fletcher said, and the way he said her name made her pause. "Thank you for everything, for being here. You have made this place feel like a home, and I did not realize how much I needed that. You gave me a place to go when I had nowhere. I think we are even." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Maybe we are." That night, lying in her bed, Olivia admitted to herself what she had been trying to ignore for weeks. She was developing feelings for Fletcher Morgan. Real feelings. The kind that made her heart race when he smiled, that made her look forward to seeing him at meals, that made her worry when he worked too long in the heat. It was both thrilling and terrifying because she had not expected to feel anything like this again. Certainly not so soon after losing her husband. She felt guilty about it, as though she were betraying her husband's memory. But her husband was gone, and she was still alive, still here, and Fletcher Morgan was kind and good and lonely, just like her. Maybe there was nothing wrong with two lonely people finding comfort in each other's company. November brought the first real cold, and with it, preparations for winter. Fletcher slaughtered a hog, and Olivia spent days smoking and preserving the meat. Miguel and Carlos repaired the roof on the bunkhouse and reinforced the barn against the coming storms. Everyone worked together, and Olivia felt more part of something than she had in a long time. On Thanksgiving Day, she prepared a feast with a wild turkey Fletcher had shot, along with all the trimmings she could manage with their limited supplies. They all ate together at the table that had once been in her married home, and Olivia felt a pang of bittersweet emotion. Her life had changed so completely, but maybe that was all right. Maybe change was not always loss. After dinner, Miguel and Carlos went back to the bunkhouse, but Fletcher lingered, helping her clean up. "This was the best Thanksgiving I have had in years," he said, drying dishes while she washed. "Maybe the best ever, I am glad. It felt good to cook a proper meal like that." "Olivia, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy here? I mean, is this better than going to Missouri would have been?" She thought about it carefully before answering. "I think so. I did not know what would happen when I agreed to come here. I was scared, honestly, but you have been nothing but kind and respectful, and I have purpose here. I feel like I am building something instead of just surviving." "I am glad," Fletcher said quietly. "I was worried I had pushed you into something you did not want. You gave me a choice. That was more than most people would have done." They finished the dishes in comfortable silence, and when they were done, Fletcher asked if she wanted to sit on the porch for a while. The night was cold but clear, and the stars were brilliant overhead. They sat in the two rocking chairs Fletcher had carried outside, wrapped in blankets, watching the sky. "I used to do this as a boy," Fletcher said. "Sit outside and watch the stars. My father taught me some of the constellations. That is Orion there with his belt, and that bright star is the North Star. My father taught me the same things, Olivia said. I had forgotten most of them until now. It is easy to forget to look up when you are just trying to survive each day. But the stars remind you that there is more to the world than work and worry. What do they remind you of? Olivia asked. Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. That I am small, but that I am part of something bigger. That the same stars my mother saw when I was a boy are still up there, watching. It makes me feel less alone. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. I understand that feeling. He reached over tentatively and took her hand. His hand was rough from work, calloused and scarred, but warm and solid. She did not pull away. You are not alone anymore, he said. Neither of us has to be alone. They sat there holding hands under the stars, and Olivia felt something shift in her heart, something opening that she had thought was closed forever. Winter came in earnest, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. The ranch work slowed, and they spent more time indoors, huddled around the fireplace. Olivia taught Fletcher how to play chess on a set Miguel had carved from wood, and they would spend long evenings in quiet competition. She was better at it than he was, which seemed to delight him. You are a dangerous woman with those chess pieces, he said one night after she had beaten him soundly for the third time in a row. You just need more practice. You keep sacrificing your pieces too quickly. I am a rancher, not a general. I think in terms of cattle, not battle strategy. She laughed, and he smiled at the sound, and Olivia realized with a start that she could not remember the last time she had laughed so freely. As the days passed, they grew closer. Not physically beyond the occasional touch of hands, but emotionally, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Fletcher told her about the horrors he had seen in the Indian Wars, how they haunted him still, how he had promised himself he would never raise a weapon in anger again if he could help it. Olivia told him about her brief marriage, how she had loved her husband but had never really known him, how they had been almost strangers when he died. You think that is wrong? She asked one night. That I mourn him but did not really know him. I think people grieve in their own ways, and there is no wrong way to do it, Fletcher said. You lost your future with him, even if you did not know him well yet. That is worth mourning. I feel guilty sometimes, she admitted, because I am happy here, happier than I was with him. Does that make me a terrible person? No, Fletcher said firmly. It makes you human. You deserve happiness, Olivia. You deserve a life, not just survival. She looked at him across the chessboard, at his serious face lit by firelight, and felt her heart clench with emotion. Fletcher, I need to tell you something. He waited, his gray eyes steady on hers. I have feelings for you, she said, forcing the words out. Real feelings, not just gratitude or convenience. I did not plan for this to happen, and I do not know if you feel the same way, but I needed you to know. Fletcher was very still. Then he stood up and came around the table, kneeling beside her chair. Olivia Norton, I have had feelings for you since the day I saw you standing on that porch in Sonora, looking lost and brave at the same time. I have been falling in love with you every day since you came here, watching you turn my house into a home, watching you smile, listening to you laugh. I did not say anything because I did not want to pressure you, did not want you to feel obligated because I am your employer. But if you are saying what I think you are saying, then I need you to know that I love you, completely, truly. Olivia felt tears spill down her cheeks. I love you too. I did not think I would ever feel this way again, but I do. I love you, Fletcher Morgan. He reached up and cupped her face in his rough hands, wiping her tears with his thumbs. Can I kiss you? Yes. He kissed her gently, carefully, as though she were something precious. It was different from the kisses she had known before, full of tenderness and promise rather than just passion. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. "What does this mean?" Olivia asked. "Where do we go from here?" "I want to marry you," Fletcher said simply. "If you will have me, I know it is fast and I know people might talk, but I do not care about any of that. I love you and I want to build a life with you, a real life, not just an employer and employee arrangement." "Yes," Olivia said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in Sonora's small church 2 weeks before Christmas, with Sheriff Hayes and his wife as witnesses, along with Miguel, Carlos, and a handful of people from town. Olivia wore a simple blue dress she had made herself, and Fletcher wore his best clothes, looking nervous and happy in equal measure. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Fletcher kissed her in front of everyone, Olivia felt something settle in her soul, a sense of rightness that she had never felt before. This was not a marriage of convenience or desperation. This was love, real and true and hard-won. They had a small celebration at the ranch afterward, with Olivia's good cooking and a cake Miguel's wife had made. Everyone toasted the new couple, and when the sun set, the guests left, leaving Fletcher and Olivia alone together for the first time as husband and wife. "Are you nervous?" Fletcher asked as they stood in the main room of the house. "A little," Olivia admitted. "Are you terrified?" He laughed. "I want everything to be perfect for you, and I am afraid I will mess it up." She took his hand and led him to his room, which was now their room. "You could never mess this up. I love you, Fletcher. That is all that matters." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of gentle discovery and whispered words. Afterward, lying in Fletcher's arms, Olivia felt a peace she had not known in years. She had started this journey as a desperate widow with no options, and she had ended up here, loved and loving, with a future stretching out before her full of possibility. "What are you thinking?" Fletcher asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "That I am glad I sold my furniture that day, that I am glad you bought it all, that I am glad you asked me to stay. I am glad you said yes to all of it." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and outside snow began to fall gently over the Texas landscape, covering everything in white. The winter passed in a cocoon of happiness. Fletcher and Olivia learned each other in the way that newlyweds do, discovering habits and preferences, learning how to navigate disagreements, building the foundation of a marriage. They talked about the future, about expanding the ranch, about children they might have, about growing old together on this land they were both coming to love. Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle had survived the winter well, and several cows gave birth to healthy calves. Olivia planted a proper garden, and this time things grew under her care. Fletcher worked on expanding the house, adding another bedroom for future children and improving the main living space. Miguel and Carlos watched the transformation with approval, happy to see Fletcher finally settled. Miguel's wife, Rosa, started coming to visit Olivia regularly, and the two women became friends, sharing recipes and stories and the comfortable companionship of women who understood the challenges of ranch life. By summer, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She told Fletcher one evening after dinner, watching his face transform from surprise to pure joy. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes, sometime in late winter, the doctor thinks." Fletcher picked her up and spun her around, laughing, and then immediately set her down carefully as though she might break. "Should you be doing heavy work? Should you be resting more? What do you need?" "I need you to stop worrying," Olivia said, smiling. "I am pregnant, not fragile. But maybe you could finish that bedroom addition a bit faster." "I will have it done in a month," Fletcher promised. "Our child will have a proper room in a proper house." He was true to his word. Working with Miguel and Carlos, he finished the bedroom addition and also built a proper kitchen onto the back of the house, giving Olivia more space to work. The house was no longer a rough bachelor's cabin but a real home, solid and comfortable and full of life. As Olivia's pregnancy progressed, Fletcher became increasingly protective, insisting she rest more, doing extra work around the house himself, worrying over every twinge and discomfort she mentioned. It was sometimes overwhelming, but it came from love, and Olivia found it touching rather than annoying. "You are going to drive yourself mad before this baby arrives," she told him one evening when he insisted on carrying her to bed despite the fact that she was perfectly capable of walking. "I cannot help it. You are carrying the most important thing in the world. We are carrying the most important thing in the world. This is your baby too, and you are going to be a wonderful father." Fletcher's eyes got suspiciously bright. "I hope so. I want to do right by this child, give them everything I did not have." "You will. We will." Winter came again, and with it, the anticipation of the baby's arrival. Rosa had agreed to attend the birth, having delivered many babies over the years, and the doctor in Sonora had promised to come if there were complications. Olivia tried not to be nervous, but as her time grew closer, she felt the weight of what was coming. On a cold February morning in 1885, Olivia went into labor. Fletcher rode to get Rosa while Miguel stayed with Olivia, trying to keep her calm and comfortable. The labor was long and difficult, lasting all day and into the night. Fletcher paced outside the house, smoking cigarettes he had bummed off Carlos even though he did not normally smoke, driving everyone slightly crazy with his worry. Finally, as the sun was rising on a new day, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. When Rosa brought Fletcher in to see his wife and son, he stood in the doorway with tears streaming down his face. "Come meet your son," Olivia said, exhausted but radiant, holding the tiny bundle. Fletcher approached carefully, as though walking on holy ground. He looked down at the baby, at the tiny perfect face, the miniature hands curled into fists, and something broke open in him. "He is beautiful," Fletcher whispered. "You are both so beautiful. Do you want to hold him?" Fletcher took the baby with the extreme care of a man who had never held an infant before. The baby opened his eyes, dark blue like all newborns, and seemed to look right at his father. Fletcher made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Hello, son," he said. "I am your father, and I promise I will do everything in my power to give you a good life." They named him Samuel, after the man who had helped Fletcher when he needed it most, and called him Sam. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his mother's dark hair and what would eventually become his father's gray eyes. Fletcher was besotted, spending every spare moment with his son, holding him, talking to him, showing him around the ranch as though the infant could understand. "You are going to spoil him," Olivia said, watching her husband walk around the house with Sam against his shoulder. "That is my right as a father," Fletcher said seriously, "to spoil my children absolutely rotten. Children, we have one child, so far. But I am hoping for more if you are willing." Olivia smiled. "I think that could be arranged." As Sam grew, the ranch prospered. Fletcher's hard work was paying off, and they were able to hire more hands and expand their herd. The house got even more additions, growing from its rough two-room beginning into a sprawling ranch house with multiple bedrooms, a large kitchen, a proper parlor, and a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Olivia gave birth to 2 more children over the next few years. A daughter they named Margaret after Fletcher's mother, called Maggie, who had her mother's beauty and her father's determination, and another son they named Thomas, called Tommy, who was sweet-natured and gentle from birth. The house that had once echoed with loneliness now rang with the sounds of children playing. laughing, fighting, and making the beautiful chaos that is family life. Miguel and Carlos remained part of the ranch, part of the family really, and they watched the Morgan children grow with the pride of uncles. Rosa was a constant presence, helping Olivia with the children, sharing the work and the joys of raising a family. The years passed in the way that years do when life is full and good. There were challenges, of course. Droughts that made water scarce, harsh winters that tested everyone, the normal struggles of raising children and running a ranch. But Fletcher and Olivia faced everything together, their love deepening with time rather than fading. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Fletcher took Olivia back to Sonora, leaving the children with Rosa and Miguel. They stayed at the Grand Hotel, the same place where he had been staying when she agreed to come work for him all those years ago. Over dinner, they talked about everything they had built together. "You remember that day?" Fletcher asked. "When I came to buy your furniture?" "I remember being terrified and desperate and not knowing what else to do. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen. Standing there trying to figure out how to survive, not giving up even though everything had fallen apart. I remember you offering me $60 for furniture that was worth less and wondering if you were crazy or kind." "Both, probably," Fletcher said, smiling. "But I saw something in you that day, something that made me want to help, want to know you better." "Best decision I ever made, buying all that furniture. Best decision I ever made, agreeing to work for you, and then agreeing to marry you." Fletcher reached across the table and took her hand. "I love you, Olivia Morgan, more now than the day we married, which I did not think was possible." "I love you too. You gave me a life when I thought mine was over. You gave me a home and a family and a future. You gave me everything. You gave me the same things. Before you, I was just surviving, not really living. You taught me how to live again." They spent that night alone together, remembering who they were before they were parents and ranchers, just a man and a woman who had found each other when they both needed it most. The years continued to pass. Sam grew into a serious young man who loved the ranch and wanted to run it someday. Maggie was wild and beautiful, with suitors lining up before she was even old enough to consider them. Tommy was the dreamer, always with his nose in a book, talking about becoming a lawyer or a teacher, something other than a rancher. "That is all right," Fletcher said when Olivia worried that Tommy did not share his father's love of ranching. "We built this place so our children could have choices. If he wants to do something else, we will support him." "When did you become so wise?" Olivia asked. "I married a wise woman." "Some of it must have rubbed off." Fletcher's hair turned gray at the temples, and lines appeared around his eyes, but to Olivia, he was as handsome as the day she met him. She saw silver in her own hair now, and the marks that bearing children and hard work had left on her body. But Fletcher still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. They celebrated their 20th anniversary surrounded by their children, now teenagers and a young man, along with Miguel and Rosa and Carlos and his wife and their children. The ranch had become a true homestead, a place where family and friends gathered, where life was lived fully. 20 years, Fletcher said in his toast. 20 years since I rode up to a house in Sonora and met a widow selling furniture. 20 years since I had the audacity to ask her to stay. Best 20 years of my life. Best 20 years of mine, too, Olivia said, standing beside him. Here is to 20 more and 20 after that. They clinked glasses and drank, and everyone cheered, and the celebration went on late into the night. One evening many years later, when they were both in their 60s and their children were grown with families of their own, Fletcher and Olivia sat on the porch in the rocking chairs that had been part of that first furniture purchase all those decades ago. The chairs were worn now, smoothed by years of use, but still solid. You ever think about how different your life would have been if I had not bought that furniture? Fletcher asked. I would have gone to Missouri, lived with my sister, probably married someone else eventually out of necessity rather than love. I would have survived, but I would not have lived. What about you? What would have happened if you had just bought the furniture and left it at that? I would have kept on being lonely, kept on building this ranch, probably died alone in that rough two-room cabin. I needed you as much as you needed me that day, maybe more. We saved each other then. We did, Fletcher agreed, and we built something good, something that will last beyond us. Olivia took his hand, the same rough, work-worn hand that had held hers under the stars so many years ago. I am so glad you asked me to stay. I am so glad you said yes. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. The house that had grown from a cabin, the barn and outbuildings, the corrals full of horses, the distant sound of cattle lowing, and beyond it all, their children's houses on the property that had been divided among them, keeping the family together. Sam ran the main ranch now, with the same dedication his father had shown. Maggie had married a neighboring rancher and helped run that spread with fierce competence. Tommy had indeed become a lawyer, practicing in San Antonio, but he came home often to visit and had taught his own children to love the ranch. We did good, Fletcher said finally. We did real good. Yes, Olivia agreed. We did. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars they had watched together for so many years, Fletcher and Olivia remained on the porch, holding hands, grateful for the day a lonely cowboy bought all the furniture a desperate widow was selling and had the courage to ask her to stay. From that simple act of kindness and courage had grown a love that had lasted a lifetime, a family that would continue for generations, and a home that had been built not just with wood and nails but with hope, love, and the determination of two people who refused to give up on life for each other. The night grew cold and eventually they went inside to the warmth of the house, but not before Fletcher turned to Olivia one more time. I would do it all again, he said. Every moment, every choice, every challenge, all of it exactly the same because it led me to you. And I would sell that furniture again, Olivia said, smiling. And I would say yes to your offer, and yes to your proposal, and yes to every day we have had together. They went inside together, closing the door on the cold night, but not before looking back one last time at the land they loved, the life they had built, and the future that stretched out beyond them in the lives of their children and grandchildren. The house was warm, filled with the memories of decades of laughter and tears, arguments and reconciliations, ordinary days and extraordinary moments. Every room held stories. The kitchen where Olivia had made thousands of meals, the parlor where the children had played, the bedrooms where babies had been born and grown, the porch where countless evenings had been spent watching the sunset. As they prepared for bed, moving through the familiar routines of a couple who had spent a lifetime together, Fletcher looked at the chest of drawers that had been part of that original furniture purchase. It still stood in their bedroom, still solid after all these years, a reminder of where they had started. You know, he said, I bought all that furniture because I needed furniture, but what I really needed was you. I just did not know it yet. We both needed each other, Olivia said, coming to stand beside him. Two lonely people who found each other at exactly the right moment. They lay down together in the bed that had been replaced several times over the years, but still occupied the same space in the same room. Fletcher pulled Olivia close and she rested her head on his shoulder, the way she had done thousands of times before. Thank you, Fletcher whispered in the darkness. For what? For staying, for loving me, for building this life with me, for everything. Thank you for asking me to stay, for seeing something in me worth saving, for loving me when I did not think I could be loved again." They fell asleep in each other's arms, content and at peace, surrounded by the life they had built together from a chance encounter on a hot August day in Sonora, Texas, when a widow sold her furniture and a lonely cowboy bought it all and asked her to stay. Years later, long after Fletcher and Olivia had passed peacefully in their sleep within days of each other, their grandchildren would gather at the old ranch house and marvel at the story of how their grandparents had met. They would sit in the ancient rocking chairs on the porch and listen as Sam told the tale one more time, his voice warm with love and pride. "Your grandmother was selling everything she owned," he would say. "She was desperate and alone and did not know what to do. And your grandfather, he rode up and bought it all, every single piece. And then, instead of just taking the furniture and leaving, he offered her a job. He gave her a choice when she had no choices left. And from that one act of kindness grew all of this. Our family, this ranch, everything we have comes from that moment when he asked her to stay and she was brave enough to say yes." The grandchildren would ask questions, wanting to know every detail, and Sam would answer patiently, keeping the story alive for another generation. Because it was important that they understood what their grandparents had built, not just in terms of land and cattle and houses, but in terms of love and family, and the courage it takes to start over when everything seems lost. The chest of drawers that Fletcher's first wife's husband had made still stood in what had been Fletcher and Olivia's bedroom, now kept as a sort of shrine to the couple who had started it all. The rocking chairs still sat on the porch, refinished multiple times but structurally the same. The dining table had been moved to Sam's house, where his own grandchildren ate their meals at the same table where their great-grandparents had shared their first breakfast together. These pieces of furniture, bought in desperation and sold in hope, had become more than just objects. They were touchstones, physical reminders of a love story that had transformed two broken people into a family that would last for generations. On quiet evenings, when the ranch was peaceful and the work was done, members of the Morgan family would sometimes sit on that old porch and look out at the land their ancestors had built. They would think about the widow and the cowboy, about courage and kindness, about the way love could grow from the smallest seed if it was tended with care. And they would be grateful that on one hot August day in 1883, a lonely cowboy named Fletcher Morgan had the audacity to buy all the furniture a desperate widow was selling, and then ask her to stay. Because that single question, asked with hope and answered with courage, had changed everything. The ranch still stood, passed down through the generations, growing and changing but always remaining in the family. The Morgan name became synonymous with fair dealing and hard work in that part of Texas, and when people asked where it all started, the family would smile and tell the story again. It was a simple story, really. A widow selling furniture, a lonely cowboy buying it all, a question asked, an answer given, a life built together from the ashes of what had been lost. But simple stories are often the most powerful, and this one had power enough to last for generations, inspiring everyone who heard it to believe in second chances, in the possibility of love after loss, in the courage it takes to ask someone to stay, and the bravery it takes to say yes. And so the story lived on, told and retold, changing slightly with each telling but always maintaining its essential truth. That love, when it is real and true and built on a foundation of respect and kindness, can transform everything. That two people who are brave enough to choose each other, to build something together, to face life's challenges side by side, can create something that will outlast them both. The furniture that started it all remained in the family, passed down carefully, maintained lovingly, each piece a relic of that transformative day. And whenever someone sat in those rocking chairs or ate at that table or opened a drawer in that chest, they would remember Fletcher and Olivia, the widow and the cowboy, and the love story that began with a simple transaction and ended with a legacy that would last forever. The sun set over the Texas landscape, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, just as it had done on that August evening when Fletcher first rode up to Olivia's house. The land remained, the sky remained, and the story remained, proof that love, real love, the kind built on choice and commitment and daily acts of kindness, could overcome anything and leave a mark on the world that time could never erase.